They say that hope is a necessity for life. But anyone who has lived with hope also knows what it's like to see that hope fade. How do you keep living when your hope keeps dying? You used to have hope that the business would get launched, that the marriage would last, that the stock would be worth that your health would improve, that anxiety wouldn't always paralyze you, that there would be reconciliation, that somehow you'd be able to stay in that the pain would eventually go away, that being in a big city like this you'd actually experience community, that you'd finally figure out what the purpose was for your life. Our hope begins to die when whatever we've anchored our hope to can't hold the weight of our hopes. But what if we could attach our hope to something that could hold the weight of our hope? What if we could set our hopes on something that would never fade? Dying hope. This is exactly what the followers of Jesus experienced as he breathed his last breath while hanging on a cross one Friday. They had set their hopes on him being the kind of Messiah that triumphed over his enemies through his power. So when they heard him say, "It is finished," they actually thought that their hope was the thing that was over. But something happened on that Sunday. It was true. He really was alive again. And if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his spirit who lives in you. If this power is living in you, then hope never has to die. If this power can overcome your pain, your divorce, your bankruptcy, your fears, your past, your sins, and even your physical death, then you have every reason to have a living hope.
Happy Easter. See, you look like you got a lot of energy. This is number 3 for me, so I need you to bring it, okay? I need a little bit of encouragement from you today. Here's what's true for every one of us. Every one of us walked in these doors today with the hope quotient. And I don't say that because it's Easter, and I don't say that because we're gathering on a Sunday, and I don't even say that because we're doing the sacred thing called church, if you can consider a basement space beneath Market Street a sacred space. Absolutely it is. It's the cheapest thing they had in the building, trust me. But I say that we all walked in with a hope quotient because every one of us wakes up every single day with a specific level of hope that day. And here's how you determine what your hope quotient is, just so you can get around to figuring out what your hope quotient might be. Today, your hope quotient comes from the confidence you have about what you believe is in you compared to what is coming against you. A little bit of a clunky definition, but I think it matters, all of those words. So your hope quotient, your level of hope, it's determined by the confidence you have about what actually is in you in that moment compared to what it is that's coming against you in that moment. Let me give you a couple of examples, see if you can relate. If you're a single guy in the building today and you're wanting to ask out a specific single girl, your hope quotient is determined by what you think she's looking for and whether you think you have it. By the way, some of you, that's why you're at church. That's a great reason to be at church. All right? Just don't talk during the sermon. I might even, Shauna and I might even have her, my wife and I might even have her number, guys. It'll cost you. But your hope quotient would rise the moment her friends tell you she's dying for you to ask her out. Why? Nothing changed except for the information that you have. Now your confidence is increasing and your hope is rising. Here's another example. Let's say that you and I are running a marathon today at 3 p.m. You've been training for the last 12 months. You've been eating the right kinds of food. You've been staying away from the wrong kinds of food. You have been doing short run days when you needed to do the short run. I don't even know what that is. You've been doing your long runs on the days you need to do. You're resting when you're supposed to rest. I don't run ever. At all. My version of a marathon is preaching Easter 4 times in a row. That's all I've got to give you. But let's assume that at 3 p.m. today, after me running my marathon, you got your 26.2, 4 Easters, come on. But we're going to get to the starting line at 3 p.m. today. You and I will approach that starting line with very different hope quotients. Would you agree? Because mine's non-existent. Even if you were training just for a day, you already are ahead of me, and you're infused with a little more hope than I have. But in all seriousness, what we each do is we wake up every single morning asking some version of this question: what am I facing today, and do I have enough of what it takes to overcome it? What am I facing today, and do I have enough of what it takes to overcome it? If I'm looking for new housing in the city, what am I facing? Anybody ever face that, ever? Yep. That's why some of you are living together, 20 of you, like it's a compound, because you're like, I don't have what it takes, but 19 of us might have what it takes to afford to live in the city. If you're a new mom or a new dad, you've got to ask yourself, A, why did we do this? B, do we have what it takes to make it through the day? And then when you have a little human, you decide to bring another little human into the world, and I'm pretty sure we don't have what it takes. Nanny! But we're always asking, if you go into a career, if you're making a career move, you're going into an interview, you have to ask yourself the question, what am I up against? What's the competition around me? And do I have enough of what's needed, enough of what it takes to be able to overcome whatever it is that's facing me? And you probably know this, but your hope quotient can change on a daily basis, if not more frequent. How does your hope quotient change? Your hope quotient can change. One phone call can cause it to rise or fall. Have you ever had that phone call? Both ways, right? One incident could affect it. One opportunity could alter your hope quotient in a significant way. But there's one other way that your hope quotient could change, even if your circumstances never change. It could be that your hope quotient is changed merely not by circumstantial change, but by, remember what I said early on, that your hope quotient comes about by what you believe is in you compared to what's coming against you. So you guys, it could be possible that your circumstances don't change at all, but what changes is what you believe about having something more powerful than whatever it is that you're facing. And what I want you to know today is this: every one of us not only walked in with a hope quotient today, we also walked in with a set of circumstances in our lives. If anybody wishes there's a circumstance in your life that would change today while I'm talking, raise your hand. Yeah, it's probably not going to. If I go long enough, maybe we will have a circumstance change. But here's what I just told you. Remember, your hope quotient can change when your circumstances change, or if your circumstances remain exactly like they are when you walked in today, you can walk out with a different hope quotient, all because you discover something that changes your belief, that brings you this high hope quotient that never goes away. And that's my hope for you today. I do hope that so many of you, I'm even praying for a number of you that I know your stories. I'm praying that your circumstances will change. But I want to say to you from the outset today, if your circumstances don't change, I believe that you could have a belief that changes everything for you. I want to talk about a guy today who had a fluctuating hope quotient. Anybody know what that's like? Right? You're going to get the job. You're not going to get the job. You're going to get the job. Here's a first date. Here's a second date. No third date. Right? You know what it's like to have a hope quotient that changes. We know what it's like to ride the roller coaster. And this guy I'm going to tell you about today, this is exactly where he lived for the first half of his life. He would get high hope, then he would get low hope based on the circumstances surrounding him. His name is Peter, and when we're first introduced to him, he's just a fisherman. He's ordinary. He's living in obscurity. No one knows anything about him. Now, today, everyone in the Catholic and Protestant Christian world knows so much about this guy named Peter. Peter wasn't chosen by any rabbi who had come before. That's why he's doing the thing that his father taught him to do. But along comes this first century rabbi who claimed to be the Messiah. His name is Jesus, and he begins to do something. He begins to call initially a dozen people to follow him. He said, "Come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Jesus was into puns, and maybe I'll use one later. When I do, I want you to laugh. So Jesus said, "If you'll follow me, leave this fishing that you know. I'm going to teach you a new kind of fishing." And Peter's hope begins to rise because now he has something significant to live for. As time goes along, there comes this day where Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" And they're like, some say this, some say that. And then it's important who the crowds think Jesus is. That's really important. Today, we're in a crowd. Would you agree? Thanks for coming to 11:30, not coming to 10. We're breaking laws at 10, and I'm just thankful that we're not breaking laws right now. If you're a person who enforces the law, I was kidding. But today, you're still in the midst of a crowd. And so the disciples are like, here's what the crowds say. Some say John the Baptist. Some say this. Some say that. And then Jesus turns and asks a question that he wants to ask you today. Okay, enough of the crowds. Who do you say that I am? And when he asks that question, do you have that person in your family or on your team at work who's always the first to speak? Are you that person? Anybody besides me on your team, you're that person? I am that person. I'm sorry, guys. I'm that person. Peter was that person. He was always the first one to speak. So Jesus says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus says to Peter, "You're right, and you are Peter." He changes his name to a name that means the rock. You are the rock, and on you I'm going to build my church. Hope Quotient is rising. Would you agree? The Messiah not only called me, but he told me I'm going to have a significant part to play in this kingdom that he's building. Only Peter and the rest of the disciples, they had no idea what kind of kingdom this would be. There was another moment in time where Jesus said to Peter, "Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. Now, you might expect Peter to say, "Okay, sorry." He doesn't say that. Peter's hope quotient is really high at this moment, but his hope is in himself. And here's what he says to Jesus. "Jesus, even if I have to die with you, I will not disown you. You can count on me. My hope in myself is so high, I am going to be with you all the way to the end." And sure enough, you know the story, right? He did deny Jesus not 1, not 2, but the 3 times that Jesus said he would. And in that moment, all of Peter's hope begins to dissipate. And whatever ounce of hope he has left, that eventually dies out as well the moment that Jesus dies on the cross that Friday. Now, if I can fast forward with you to that Easter morning. That Easter morning, there were some of the women who were very close with Jesus. They went to the tomb to anoint his body. And when they got there and discovered that he wasn't there, they came back to tell the disciples. And by the way, if you need a plausible piece of evidence for why you should begin to believe that the resurrection actually happened, you need to understand this. The women discovered it first. You ladies are always getting there before we do. Give us time. But in the first century, in that time and in that place, women were never seen as credible witnesses. So if there was a woman in court and her word against a man in court, it wouldn't matter. You would never, if you're Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you would never write that into the story unless it happened. But the women come back and they tell the disciples, and I want you to see how faith-filled the disciples were. Luke 24, 11 and 12, you'll see it on the screen. And I just want you to see what Peter does along with the other disciples. It says, "But they, the disciples, did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb." There's your marathon friend. "Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened." If today you struggle to believe that this actually happened, you're in really good company. You're like, "Ben, I know there's a lot of skeptics." No, you're really good company with those who led the mission of the movement of Jesus forward in the first century. Some of you are like, "Ben, this is my one time to be in church. You better make sure you bring it." No pressure. Listen, the likelihood of you going from being a skeptic in your seat today to having my job this time next year, same likelihood that these guys would go from no belief to being the ones responsible for carrying the mission of Jesus forward. But I love Peter's thought. He's like, this is fairy tale. Why are you tricking us? Why are you teasing us? But then it says what? Peter, however. Peter, however. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Maybe you're in the same boat with Peter today. You don't believe it. You're not even sure why you're here. But isn't it at least worth you looking into? Because here's what I know for so many of you. You're like, Ben, how do you know me? I've never been here before. You're like, did God tell you? He did. I'm joking. Here's what's true for so many of you. You might not want anything to do with Jesus, but you want everything to do with hope. You're like, Ben, you don't know me. I know you're human. I know that you have in you what every one of us has in us. We long to have something to anchor our hope to. And you are not interested at all in trying the religion thing. Everything that's happened in the name of religion, you want nothing to do with that. I'm not sure I do either. But I know you do want something to do with hope. And let me just ask you this. If you're going to try to find hope in all the things you've tried to find it in so far, in relationships and pleasure and kids and seeing your kids leave the house, right, whatever, when you've tried to find hope in your business taking off or getting funding or being able to stay in San Francisco, whatever you've anchored your hope to, I just want to ask you, if it hasn't held the weight of your hope in the end, isn't it at least worth you doing what Peter did? Isn't it at least worth you going, however, because here's what Peter thought. I don't think it's true. But what if it is? If it's true, then anything is possible. If it's true, then the thing that I thought was over might not ever be over. If it's true, then perhaps I will never face anything as powerful as this thing that has happened, if it's true. And so he investigates. And by the way, if you're here investigating today, that's a massive first step. You can congratulate yourself. You can give yourself brunch today. You can have the donuts that Lindsay was just mentioning. If you're seeking, God has made this promise to you today. If you'll seek me, you'll find me. If you will seek me, you will find me. Peter goes back to fishing. When you lose all hope, you just kind of go back to the thing that you knew how to do before your hopes got raised. So he goes back to fishing. And one night, he and his disciple friends, they fished all night and they haven't caught anything. And in the distance, they hear a voice saying this, "Put the net on the right side of the boat, and there you'll catch fish." Whose voice was it? Now, remember what I told you, that your hope quotient can change by simply getting a phone call, right? It could cause it to rise or fall. You could have one discovery that could cause your hope quotient to change. There could be one incident. There could be one opportunity. Or you know what else could cause your hope quotient to shift this morning? For Peter, it was hearing a familiar voice that he never thought he would hear again. But he can't make out the voice. And so John's going to tell him who it is. I'm going to show you this in John 21, verse 7. It'll be on the screen. But let me give you a little bit of context. It's going to talk about the disciple whom Jesus loved. John is the disciple whom Jesus loved. John is also the one writing about being the disciple whom Jesus loved. Everybody understand? The one we're about to read about, John wrote that he was the disciple whom Jesus loved. I mean, okay. It's kind of like, the Bible's fascinating, by the way. In the Old Testament, Moses is the one who wrote that Moses was the most humble person to ever live. Okay. Anyway, John, the disciple that Jesus loved. Here's what he writes about that happened as they heard that voice, and Peter didn't know who it was yet. It says, "Then the disciple whom Jesus loved," that's me, by the way, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. Now, if you know anything about Peter, he was the one who was always reacting and responding immediately. And to be honest, I see so much of myself in Peter. I typically speak before I think, just so you'll give me grace in the future. Just telling you everything's going. I typically respond right away. I typically think I know the answer before you finish the question. To which someone in my life might say, "Ben, you don't even know what I was going to say." Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I react too quickly. That's just my MO. And Peter, he's the same way. But you know what? All of you people who think before you speak, anybody think before they speak? Anybody slow responders? That's a strength for you 99% of the time. But sometimes you just need to go. There are times when it's appropriate to react immediately. You know when those times are? When you have a reason to have a rising hope quotient that if this is true, will never go away. And so Peter puts on his outer garment. That's the only thing he takes time to do. And Jesus is like, "Thank you, Peter. and he jumps in. The Greek there that the New Testament language is written in, the Greek there literally means that he cast himself into the water from the boat. He just threw himself into the water. Why? Because his hope is rising. Because his hope is coming back to life. Because he now knows that Jesus has come back to life. But maybe you're still skeptical. You're like, Ben, anybody can have hope for a moment. That's true. Those of you who are the biggest pessimists in the room, even you find hope occasionally, right? Right? Like the sun comes out for 2 seconds in San Francisco, you're like, whoa. But then you're like, no, I have a good reason to be a pessimist because there it goes. But I think we need to investigate Peter's hope. We need to see if his newfound hope gave way to that despair he knew before. We need to see, did his hope remain? Did it stay steadfast? So what's an appropriate way we could check in with Peter and see, did it stay with him? Would you agree that if we could fast forward 30 years and see if it's still there, would that be sufficient for the skeptics in the room? Just say yes, because I don't have any other sermon to give. I want to ask you to stand. I want to read 2 verses as you stand. This is our main text for today. I want to give you a little bit of context. It's in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Peter wrote 2 letters that are included in our Bible. And I want to read you verses 3 and 4 from the first letter, chapter 1. What Peter does in verses 1 and 2 is he does what anyone does when they're writing a good letter. They give a greeting, right? Everybody's like, Ben, I don't know. I know how to do a quick email. I don't know about a big letter. We write a greeting, and then he announces his audience. And his audience in this moment are scattered Christians who are facing persecution. It's around 60 AD. It's been some 30 years or so since this moment on the cross for Jesus, and even since this moment in the water for Peter. He gets the greeting out, and then what we would typically do at that moment is write about the thing that's foremost on our mind. So this is 30 years later. I wonder what is on Peter's mind. Verse 3, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a what? Yeah, you sound like you have it. Into a what? Come on, 11:30, I told you, I'm fading. Let's go. Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you. You may be seated. 30 years later, what is he saying to us? This is a man who had a fluctuating hope quotient. It was up one day, circumstances made it down the next day, then he got hopeful again, then it went down. And then he's saying, 30 years ago, I witnessed something. And from that day till this day, hope hasn't left the building. And you might say, oh, he must have positive environment that he's living in. No, hope never left the building. It never spoiled. It never perished. It never faded. And no matter what you might think is the thing that's going to give it to you, every one of us would love some hope that wouldn't perish. Anybody? Every one of us would love to take hold of a hope and anchor our life to some hope that wouldn't fade and that wouldn't spoil. And Peter's going, it never went away. Let me tell you a couple other reasons we know from Peter's life. This real man who lived, this real man who was flawed, this real man who lived in despair, this real man who denied he even knew who Jesus was. He's a real person just like us. 2 months after the death of Jesus, Peter is talking about the hope he's found in Jesus just 2 months afterwards. And the people who are in the authorities there, they're saying to Peter, you've got to stop talking about the name of Jesus. Now, pre-cross Peter would have been like, my lips are sealed. I don't know that man. Post-resurrection Peter, he literally says this, you guys decide for yourselves what you need to do with us, but here's our reality. Because of what we've seen, we can't stop talking. We've seen too much, we've heard too much. Not only that, right, that's 2 months, does he hold his hope? But in AD 64, Peter's going to be executed at the hands of Nero. Not long after he wrote what we just read. And I don't know what you're up against today. Peter's saying, when I went up against the thing that should have stripped me of all hope, when my life was on the line physically, it wasn't just a bad emotional day. when it came time for me to put up or shut up, I stayed true, and my hope never spoiled. It never perished. It never faded. And tradition tells us that Peter was crucified upside down because he did not consider himself worthy to be crucified in the same posture as his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, none of us want those circumstances, but all of us want that hope. But you would say today, Ben, I don't really know much yet about living hope. Maybe you don't, but you're so familiar with dying hope, aren't you? The thing you thought would be around forever isn't there today. You're familiar with dying hope. You hope that the business would get launched. You hope that the marriage or relationship would last. You hope that the stock would be worth something. You hope that full health would return. You hope that you could have kids one day. You hope that you would be married. You hope that you could stay in the city. Or maybe you hope to move to some other city. You hope that your past would no longer have to dictate your future. But those hopes were not materialized. And what you know when it comes to living hope isn't much, but you know a lot about hope that has died. And right now, some of you are in the midst of something, and again, I wish I could change your circumstance, but I can't. But there is something that is ransacking your hope right now as I speak. It's a work thing, or it's a neighbor thing, or it's a health thing, or it's a baby thing, or it's a teenager thing, or it's your parents thing, or it's a San Francisco thing, or it's something that you've lost that was so valuable, or someone you've lost that was so valuable to you. And you might say to me, Ben, I have a good reason not to have hope. And I say, yes, you do. But let me tell you, that's not the end of your story. So many of you think the end is behind you. There's been things happen to you that are just unimaginable. People have taken advantage of you. People have abused you. We've had people in our church community have to bury their babies. We've had people who can't get rid of the depression that has just got such a paralyzing hold on them. Some of you are in this room right now, and I am not the pastor who's going to tell you it's easy, just have enough faith, it will all go away. I'm going to tell you, lean into it, but I want you to know you don't have to lean into it alone, because there can be something that gets in you that's greater than anything that will ever come against you, including the thing that has you in its grips right now. And if there's no person in your life that's willing to share that with you, let me be that guy today. But some of you are like, Ben, I'm so glad the people who are struggling are hearing that powerful Easter message today, but my HQ is high because life has never been better. We're so happy for you. Thrilled. Oh, I'm genuinely happy for you. You're making more money than you could have ever imagined. You're more successful than your parents told you could be. You're a big deal in the valley. Your kids are thriving. Everything you had on your goals list for 2018, you're living in it in 2019. I'm thrilled for you, but let me tell you why you might be in greater danger than those who are suffering today. You might be in greater danger because you believe you found something to fix your hope to, right? But let me tell you what I found out. In my role here at Epic, you might imagine I get to hear all kinds of stories. And what I know is this, that no matter how wealthy you are, you will discover that money will not solve everything. I could point you to case after case after case. No matter how great your relationships are today, every relationship will end. Even if it's through death itself, every relationship will end. No matter how healthy you and your family are today. When it comes to what you're anchoring your hope to, all I want to ask you are two questions. The first one is, will it remain at any given time? Like, is it still going to be there in 30 years? Don't get depressed, right? I'm going to keep going. 60 years, is it there? 100 years? Are you really going to anchor your hope to something that's not going to last too long? Secondly, are you anchoring your hope to something that can overcome, has the ability to overcome anything that would come against you? I hope you have an amazing career, but it won't be that powerful. I hope you have an incredible marriage if you're married, but it won't be that powerful. I hope you get everything that you desire and wish for, but it won't be able to overcome anything that comes against you. Paul was a contemporary of Peter's, and he also wrote about how our hope should be tied to the resurrection. And Paul also said, just for those of you that are still like, give me some evidence, Paul said that Jesus appeared to 500 people post-resurrection, and what he was saying to his first century audience in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 was, if you don't believe, go ask them, and them, and them, and them, and them. We don't have that luxury, but we do have the opportunity to take him at his word. And so Paul was writing to a group of Christians in a city of Thessalonica. And in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, listen to what he says. He writes, brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. Paul did not make light of their suffering. He said, grieve, embrace it, lean into it. Don't pretend like this world is awesome. And as your pastor, I am not saying today, oh, just have enough faith. I'm telling you today, grieve what's going on in our world and grieve what might be going on in your life. Grieve it. But know that as your grief pours out, you're not in your grief alone. And so Paul says, you don't have to grieve in the same way that every bit of mankind grieves. You can grieve as those with hope. And that's news I need to know. Anybody else? When I woke up this morning to the news of what had happened in Sri Lanka, bombs hitting churches like crazy, hitting hotels. I don't know what the count is, but when I got here this morning, 200 dead, 450 injured. The grief that's going to pour out of that place on a day that they're there to celebrate. One of my closest friends in the world lost his father 7 days ago today. As I interacted with him this week, I just wanted to know, man, grieve. We've got you. And he has, but he's not grieving without hope. There's a little girl that lives in my home. She's been through things you wouldn't wish on your enemy. And she doesn't have it perfect. But she's learning to live with hope. And I don't know what you're up against. I don't know what's taken you out. I don't know what's made life really not worth living. But I want you to know you don't have to do any of your grieving without hope. You don't have to live in fear without hope. Your circumstances are not more powerful than the one who came back from the dead, overcoming sin and the grave so that he could overcome whatever it is that you face today. And even if you don't get out of it today, I pray that you will. But even if you don't get out of it today, hold on to the hope because you and I cannot live without it. And I'm not here to give you some false hope that you can prop yourself up against. I'm here to give you the hope that I found, and that Peter, the one who had a great fluctuating hope, he finally discovered something that would keep his hope steady till the end of his days. Guys, this resurrection power, it isn't just for the wealthy or the poor. It's not just for men or for women. It's not just for the religious or the irreligious. It's not just for the young or for the old. The scriptures say that this power of resurrection is available to everyone who believes. You walked in with a hope quotient today, you could walk out with a different one. You're like, Ben, did my circumstances change? Probably not. But remember, your hope quotient comes from the confidence you have about what you believe is in you compared to what is coming against you. And I don't think this issue is clear enough, so let me bring a little bit of added clarity. So many people think that Easter and our belief in the resurrection is simply about us getting our minds around whether the event from 2,000 years ago happened. That's a step, and that's a huge first step, so engage there. Please, start there, like Peter. But what all of the writers in the scriptures would say is that not only did it happen, but because it happened, somehow that resurrection can get into us. And if there's resurrection in you, then you will never face anything that comes against you that's more powerful than what is in you. I know you're an amazing human being, but you don't have that resurrection power on your own, but it's available to you. Who's it available to? Everyone who believes. So do you? Each of you should have this Easter at Epic card. It's just a response card. Even if you're not going to fill it out, would you take hold of it for me? It'll keep my insecurities from going down. You guys, there are all kinds of faith responses that might be appropriate. We've limited these to 3, but let me say this. Wherever you're at with what you sense God might be doing in your life, lean in and participate. Even if it seems like a small baby step, take it. But there are 3 steps I think will resonate with many of you. The first one says, I'm ready to start my faith journey. And here's what that means. It doesn't mean you have all of your questions answered, because if you have all of your questions answered, you're a step ahead of me, because I don't. But have you settled the great question that, did this happen? And if it did, could it give me something to anchor my hope to? And the answer from Peter and from countless others would say yes. For me, yes. And so today, it's just like I'm anchoring my hope to this. I want to begin this journey, Jesus. If that's you, you can let us know. Just you can circle that. You can put an X through the circle. You can also do this. You can just get your phone out and text the word begin to 313131. If you don't want to speak to any humans today at Epic, you don't have to. Just text begin to 313131, and immediately we will send you something right back to your phone. And there'll be some resources and next steps and things for you to see and hear so that you know how to move forward. So that's a number of you, and if that's you, we'd love to encourage you to take that step. And then others of you, the second one, come back to my faith. Here's what's true for a number of you, and we hear this story all the time. It wasn't that you never had faith, you just set it aside due to something that happened. There was a work thing, or there was a health thing, or there was a relationship thing, or there was a disappointment with God thing. That's a real thing. There was a move to San Francisco thing. There was a starting a business thing. There was a starting a family thing. And you just bowed out. You just set it aside for a while. It's not that you became an atheist. You just quit actively engaging in this faith journey. If that's you today, we'd love to, we think, through God's invitation to you to offer you a chance to come back in. Re-engage your faith. And then the third one is declare my faith through baptism. Baptism is how Christians have signified their hope that they've found in Jesus for the last 2,000 years. And we'd love to invite you to take that step if that's you. There's already 5 or so people that are ready to take that step next week. But whatever your response is, if it's one of those 3, all we want you to do is bring that out to the lobby, hand us your card, and we want to hand you a resource bundle. We want to be the kind of church that comes alongside of you and says, hey, let's figure this out together. Here's a first step. No tests, don't worry. But we want to encourage you as you take your step of faith, whatever that might be. And so just bring us your card in the lobby and we'll give you one of these. Someone on our team will do that. But let me tell you a couple of other things and then we'll be done. One of the best ways to keep your hope quotient high is to deeply connect yourself with a hope-filled community. So the reason that we show up the other 51 Sundays of the year, who's kidding who? None of us come every Sunday of the year. But the reason the rest of us show up here on other Sundays is not because we want to check something off our religious list. It's not because somebody told us we'll be in trouble if we don't show up. The reason the rest of us show up here and do life together outside of Sundays is because we need to be reminded from each other that there's still reason to have hope. When I'm down, I need you to tell me, Ben, remember what God did before. When the job thing goes south, I need someone to remind me, Ben, remember how God provided for you before. He will do it again. And we invite you back next week. This critical series we're kicking off, Lies We Tell Ourselves. I believe that Jesus will set people free next week because if you have believed a lie, you live as though it's true, which will lead to all kinds of terrible things in your future. Speaking of lies we believe, you walked in here with a hope quotient. And your hope quotient could have been in one place because of a lie you believed previously to coming in here. Your circumstances probably haven't changed. Please email me if they do in the time that I'm teaching. But your hope quotient can change because of what you come to believe in this moment. The truth that will set you free and give you hope. May the living hope of Jesus carry you not just on this special day of the year. May the living hope of Jesus carry you through your amazing times and every time that isn't quite amazing. Thanks for being here today. Let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you for hope. Thank you that when I wake up tomorrow morning, I have a reason to believe that somehow your power in me is greater than whatever I will face, greater than what my marriage will go through, greater than what my family will experience, greater than the challenges of leading this Epic Church community, greater than the phone call I could get from a family member. Jesus, thank you so much that you've given me something that will not die out, I love Peter's words, Jesus. We all need those words today, that in your resurrection we've found a living hope that will never perish, that will never spoil, and that will never fade. That's what we want to lock ourselves to for the rest of our days. Would you give us a compelling reason to live with hope? It's in your name that we pray. Amen. I want to ask you to stand. In this song, maybe it will be familiar, maybe it won't be familiar to you, but all we're trying to do in this moment with this song is to recognize that what we have in the person of Jesus, and we're going to sing this bridge part that just says there's nothing that he faced or that you and I will face that has more power than the power that Jesus has given to us.